Hey, everybody. Some of you may have noticed that the last couple of Fridays we've been working through the book of James. I want to keep that going today. Last Friday we left off with James chapter 1, verse 8. So today we're going to pick up in James chapter 1, verse 9, and we're going to be reading to verse 11. It begins like this. James says, "Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation." This is really something. That lowly brother it means a poor person, someone who's poor. Another translation puts this verse this way: the brother in humble circumstances ought to take pride in his high position. It seems like James is saying that to be poor is to be exalted, is to have a high position. The poor man ought to rejoice and take pride in being poor. Why is this? Well, perhaps if we read what James has to say about the rich person, it'll shed some light here. So he says the brother in humble, or he says, let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich man boast in his humiliation. James is indicating the opposite for the rich person than what he said for the poor person. He says that a rich person should take pride in the humiliation of being rich. What is he talking about here? Well, indeed, throughout history, certainly today, but throughout all of history, rich people are kind of seen as higher society than the rest of us. And a rich person's, the richest person's attitudes and beliefs and advice are the most sought after and the most publicized, right, in our culture, because there's this internal conviction that these rich people must be smarter than the rest of us because they're so good at making money. James seems to be reversing this thinking. He says, he continues in verse 10, he says, because like a flower of the grass, he, the rich person, will pass away. Verse 11, for the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the grass. Its flowers falls and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. The most famous rich man to ever live will fade away. His pursuits, even when they're noble, will be temporary rather than eternal. Riches of the earth are kind of like tokens at Chuck E. Cheese or tickets at Chuck E. Cheese. You can only use them at Chuck E. Cheese. You can only use them for the prizes and the games there at Chuck E. Cheese, and it's all kind of cheap, and that's it. And you're only at Chuck E. Cheese for a little bit, right? And so it is here. All the riches you gain here on earth, you can only use here on earth. And James will tell us later that you're only on earth for a mist of a moment. Like a mist. You'll be here one second and gone the next. In his commentary on James, Gary Holloway puts it this way: money promises security and permanence, but cannot deliver them. Here James says that the rich Christian must realize that their riches are not signs of their high position, but rather they are signs of a great, weighty responsibility, that they are to be stewards to use their riches, God's riches really, for the kingdom. A rich Christian is meant, listen, to be a river rather than a swamp. They're meant to be a conduit where the resources flow through them, rather than a reserve, a stagnant reserve that hoards as much as it can. And it should be noted that a river rarely gets as much press as the sea it's pouring into. Before you dismiss this as not applying to you because you don't deem yourself to be rich, I want to share a quote with you I read in an article this morning in the Washington Post. It goes like this, and I quote, "After adjusting for cost of living differences, a typical American still earns an income that is 10 times the income received by the typical person in the world." The average American earns an income that is 10 times greater than the income received by a typical person in the world. Those who are poor will have an easier time relying on God rather than their riches. They also will not be bothered with the worldly stresses that comes with riches. Granted, they're going to have struggles of their own. But this is part of why James says that the poor person should take pride or boast in their high position. From a spiritual perspective, their burden is lighter and the hurdles are lower between them and God. The question of this text for you and I today is, what am I pursuing with my life? In short, when you pass away, because you will your pursuits have made a real eternal difference? Or will your pursuits leave no positive sign that they ever happened. How can you use your resources to make an eternal difference in the world around you? Thanks for watching. We'll see you Sunday.